The first abandoned car didn't scare us. It was everything that came after it. When the police finally searched Route 16 the next morning, there wasn't a single abandoned vehicle, not one. The pickup truck was gone. The minivan was gone. Even the police cruiser we'd seen with its emergency lights flashing had vanished. The detective looked at the five of us for a long time. Then he quietly asked, "Are you absolutely sure you were on Route 16? I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to believe we'd taken a different road, but I couldn't, because I still had the receipt from the gas station we'd visited just before turning onto that highway. The address printed at the bottom read, "Last stop Gas and Market, Route 16 Junction." When I showed it to the detective, his face changed. He looked at me, then at the receipt, then back at me. Finally, he whispered something I'll never forget. "That gas station burned down 7 years ago, and my name is Daniel." Everything I'm about to tell you happened 2 summers ago. It was supposed to be one last trip before our lives changed forever. There were 5 of us, me, my cousin Jake, our friends Ryan, Olivia and Chris. We'd all grown up together after college. Jobs had started pulling us in different directions. Ryan was moving to another state. Olivia had accepted a teaching position overseas. We all knew weekends like this weren't going to happen again. So we planned one final road trip. No destination, no schedule, just drive wherever the road took us. The first day couldn't have been better. We stopped at small diners, took photos at random viewpoints, argued over music, laughed about stupid things we'd done back in school. By midnight, we were still hours away from finding a motel. Jake was driving. Chris checked the GPS. "If we stay on the interstate, we won't get there until almost 4. Ryan leaned forward. "There's another road." He zoomed in on the map. "Route 16, a narrow highway that cuts straight through the mountains. It'll save nearly an hour." Olivia frowned. "I've never heard of it." Jake shrugged. "Neither have I." Chris laughed. "It's just a road." We voted 5-0, worst decision we ever made. About 20 minutes later, we stopped for fuel. The gas station looked forgotten. Only one pump worked. The sign outside buzzed loudly in the darkness. Inside, the shelves were half empty. An old radio crackled behind the counter. The cashier looked at us without smiling. "You heading toward Route 16? Jake nodded. "Yeah." The old man slowly folded his newspaper. "Road's quiet tonight." Ryan smiled. "That's kind of the point." The cashier ignored the joke instead. He looked at each of us, one by one, almost as if he were counting. Finally, he asked, "How many?" Jake answered. 5. The old man nodded, then slid the receipt across the counter. "Make sure it stays that way." Chris laughed. "Does everyone around here enjoy creeping people out?" The cashier didn't respond. He simply looked back down at his newspaper as we walked outside. Olivia whispered, "I don't like this place." Neither did I, but we were all too excited to care. Route 16 began with a faded sign. Most of the reflective paint had peeled away. Tall pine trees swallowed both sides of the road within minutes. Our phones lost service, one by one. Then the radio faded into static. Jake tried changing stations. Nothing, just silence. Ryan looked out the window. "This place is dead." He wasn't exaggerating. There were no houses, no lights, no passing traffic, nothing except endless forest. Then we saw the pickup truck. It sat neatly on the shoulder, driver's door wide open, headlights still on, engine running. Jake slowed. "Someone probably needs help." Chris looked around. "There isn't anybody." I grabbed my flashlight. "I'll check," before I opened the door. Olivia stopped me. "Wait, what? Listen." Everyone went quiet. There wasn't a sound, no insects, no wind, nothing. I've spent enough time camping to know forests are never completely silent. This one was. Jake rolled the window down. "Hello?" Nothing. We waited almost 30 seconds. No reply. Finally, he drove on. Nobody spoke for a while. Then Ryan pointed ahead. There, another vehicle. A silver SUV parked perfectly straight, all 4 doors closed, hazard lights blinking. The battery should have been dead. But the lights flashed at a steady rhythm. Click, click, click. Jake didn't even slow down this time. As we passed, I noticed children's drawings taped to the rear window. Bright colors, happy faces. One drawing showed a family holding hands, the next showed only 4 people. Someone had been erased. I told myself I was imagining things, I never mentioned it. 15 minutes later, we found a delivery van, back doors wide open. Dozens of cardboard boxes scattered across the road. None of them had been opened. Olivia looked at Jake. This isn't normal. No, it isn't. Chris pulled out his phone, still no signal. I don't care what anybody says. We turn around. Jake checked the GPS. The map had frozen. Our blue location arrow had disappeared. Only the grey highway remained. Ryan sighed. We've already come this far. There has to be another town ahead. Jake nodded. We keep going. Nobody argued, mostly because nobody wanted to admit we were getting scared. Another 10 minutes passed, then we saw flashing lights, blue, red, a police cruiser parked diagonally across one lane, driver's door open, emergency lights still flashing. Jake stopped the SUV. This has to be real. We all climbed out. The night air felt colder than before. The cruiser was empty. Radio still on, static filled the cabin. The keys were still in the ignition. Jake reached for the radio microphone. The moment he picked it up, a voice came through, not from the radio, from somewhere behind us. You shouldn't touch that. We spun around. An older man stood on the opposite side of the road, wearing a sheriff's uniform. He wasn't holding a flashlight. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He simply stood there, watching us. Jake let out a relieved laugh. Officer, thank God. We've been trying to find somebody. The man didn't move. Instead, he asked one question. How many vehicles have you passed? Jake looked confused. I don't know, 5 maybe. The sheriff slowly nodded. Then he looked directly at me. When you see the 6th one, don't stop. Before any of us could ask why, a loud engine roared somewhere deep in the darkness, not close, but getting closer, fast. The sheriff's expression changed instantly. His calm face disappeared. For the first time, he looked afraid. He stepped backward toward the trees, then shouted, "Get back in your vehicle." Jake didn't hesitate. We jumped into the SUV. Doors slammed, seatbelts clicked. The engine barely had time to start. A pair of bright headlights suddenly appeared around the bend behind us. They were moving far too fast. Much faster than anyone should have been driving on that road. Jake floored the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward. I looked back through the rear window. The headlights kept getting closer. Closer. Then, for just a split second, they illuminated the abandoned police cruiser. It wasn't empty anymore. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, watching us leave. Jake slammed his foot against the accelerator. The SUV shot forward. None of us looked away from those headlights. They kept getting closer, too fast, far too fast. Ryan twisted around in his seat. They're gaining on us. I looked through the rear window. The vehicle behind us wasn't weaving. It wasn't flashing its lights. It stayed perfectly centered, almost as if it already knew exactly where we were going. Jake pushed the speedometer past 80. The engine screamed. The headlights never fell back. Then, without warning, they disappeared, not gradually, not around a corner. 1 second they were there, the next. Complete darkness. Jake slowed. What the? Chris looked behind us. There isn't even another road. Nobody understood. About 5 minutes later, we saw another vehicle, a family minivan, parked across part of the shoulder. The rear hatch was open. Suitcases were scattered everywhere. A child's stuffed bear lay in the middle of the road. Olivia whispered, "This has to stop. We have to call someone." I checked my phone again. 1 bar for the first time in nearly an hour. I dialed 911. The call connected. A woman answered. "Emergency services." I almost shouted. "We're on Route 16. There are abandoned vehicles everywhere. I think people are missing." There was a long silence. Then she quietly asked, "What mile marker?" I looked outside. "Mile 27. Another pause. Her breathing changed. "Leave." "What? Do not stop. Do not get out of your vehicle. We are sending officers." The call ended. Seconds later, the signal disappeared again. 10 minutes later, trees gave way to lights. A small town. Never had a place looked so welcoming. Jake drove straight to the sheriff's office. The deputy on duty listened without interrupting. When we finished, he looked confused. You said Route 16. Yes, he slowly stood up. Follow me. He led us into a conference room. An older detective joined us a few minutes later. Grey hair, reading glasses, a thick case file under his arm. He spread dozens of photographs across the table. Every one of them showed abandoned vehicles. Different years, different makes, different models. Some matched exactly what we'd seen. The pickup, the delivery van, the family minivan, even the police cruiser. My stomach dropped. You've found them before. The detective shook his head. No, these photographs were taken by survivors. He pointed at the picture of the cruiser. We've never located this vehicle. Ryan frowned. Then how? The detective interrupted. Because when officers search the highway, it's always empty. Silence filled the room. Then he asked, "Did you stop?" Jake nodded. "At the police cruiser." The detective closed his eyes. "And did anyone speak to you?" I remembered the sheriff, the calm voice, the warning. "Yes." The detective slowly looked up. "What did he tell you?" I answered. "He said, when you see the sixth vehicle, don't stop." The detective stared at us. None of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "Every survivor says the same thing." And the next morning, 2 patrol cars escorted us back to Route 16. The detective rode with us. I expected to see every abandoned vehicle again. Instead, nothing. The road was completely empty. No pickup truck, no SUV, no delivery van, no cruiser, nothing. The detective never looked surprised. Almost as if he'd expected this. We drove for nearly an hour. Then, he suddenly asked Jake to stop. "This is where you said the police cruiser was." Jake nodded. "But there isn't anything." The detective stepped out, walked to the edge of the road, then pointed at the ground. Fresh tire marks, not ours, wide, heavy, as if dozens of vehicles had recently stopped there. The detective photographed everything, but there was something stranger. Beside the tire tracks were footprints, hundreds of them, all leading away from the highway into the forest. None coming back. 3 days later, the detective called us. "We've reviewed every highway camera." We drove back immediately. Inside the control room, he played the footage. Our SUV appeared leaving the gas station, then entering Route 16. Everything matched our story. The pickup truck, nothing. The delivery van, nothing. The police cruiser, nothing. Every place where we'd stopped, the cameras showed only our SUV parked beside an empty road. No abandoned vehicles. No flashing lights, no sheriff, nothing. Ryan pointed at the screen. Pause. The detective did. Our SUV sat motionless. The driver's door opened. Jake climbed out, then me, then Chris. We were clearly looking at something, talking to someone, listening, but the road around us was completely empty. There wasn't another vehicle anywhere. The detective quietly said, "You weren't talking to each other. You were facing someone." Nobody answered, because he was right. A week later, the detective discovered something unexpected. The gas station receipt I'd kept. He tracked down the business license. The gas station had existed, exactly where we'd stopped, but not anymore. It had burned to the ground. 7 years earlier, the cashier had died in the fire. When he showed us an old newspaper clipping, my heart nearly stopped. The photograph showed the owner standing beside the gas pumps. It was the same old man who had sold us fuel, the same man who had looked at us and quietly said, "Make sure it stays that way." Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least we tried to pretend it had. None of us ever drove isolated highways again. None of us ever joked about urban legends then. Almost a year later, a plain envelope arrived at my apartment. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a faded photograph. 5 young people stood beside an SUV on Route 16. At first, I didn't recognize them. Then I looked closer. It was us. The exact night we disappeared onto that highway. The picture had been taken from deep inside the trees. None of us were looking toward the camera. We had no idea someone was watching. I turned the photograph over. Only 4 words were written in faded black ink. "You stopped 5 times," I counted. The pickup truck, the SUV, the delivery van, the police cruiser, the family minivan. 5. Then I remembered the sheriff's warning. "When you see the 6th vehicle, Don't stop, we never did to this day. Nobody knows what the sixth vehicle was, or who took that photograph. Maybe we were lucky, maybe someone was trying to lead us somewhere, or maybe we escaped before we found out what waited at the end of Route 16. That was the end of this story. If you've ever experienced something you still can't explain, or have a strange story of your own, send it to Tales of the Dark. Your story could become the next nightmare featured on this channel if you are new here. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.